Hi there. Welcome to Craft with Kathie. I'm coming at you from the suburbs west of Chicago. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going to be creating a wreath using this beautiful transfer called Hello Valentine. And there's 4 different images with different wording on this transfer. It's 12 by 18 inches. And it is actually on sale right now for 50% off. I will put the link in the description if you want to run over and grab it. It's while supplies last, and you could do lots of things for this with this transfer. I am going to customize one of our simple shapes and then use that simple shape that I paint and put an image on, combined with a heart-shaped beaded wreath that I picked up at the craft store. And very easily, I'm going to make a beautiful piece of Valentine decor for my front entranceway. Get comfy, grab something to drink, and let's get started on this. We have wood simple shapes that are the perfect size for this transfer. You can fit each of the individual images on a rectangular simple shape. If you don't want the simple shapes and have your own surface, that's fine. Our transfers can be used on wood, dry erase, chalkboard, glass, metal, just about anything flat without a lot of nap. You could even use our transfers on fabric, but if you're going to use them on fabric, and if it's going to be something to be washed, you want to use ink instead of our chalk paste. Now, our chalk paste is totally different from chalk paint. Our paste is actually made with chalk, and it was specifically developed to go with our transfers. Our transfers are vinyl and silkscreen, and the chalk paste or our ink work perfectly with them. Our chalk paste goes on liquid and dries to a hard finish. Our transfers are reusable 8 to 12 times or more, and they're easy to use and easy to clean. I'm just cutting the transfer apart on the cut lines, and then we'll get started with the project. If you pull our transfer off of the backer sheet, you can see that the shiny side is sticky, and the carrier sheet has one side that's shiny, one side that's dull. You always put the glossy or shiny side up against the sticky side of your transfer so that it doesn't stick to anything else. Care of our transfers are pretty simple. If you're using chalk paste, our paste is water soluble. So basically it's rinsing it off, making sure there's no chalk paste stuck in the silk screen, and then letting it dry, putting it back in its packaging, and going on from there. So this is a simple shape. It is 5 by 12 inches. I should have known that. I measured it earlier and I forgot. And I'm going to actually paint this. And I'm going to use a mixed up color that I created using our cranberry jam. So this is cranberry jam in bright white. I know this looks really messy. It's partially mixed. It's not fully mixed. There's little chunks of cranberry jam in there that haven't fully dissolved, and that's the way I like it because I like the idea of getting a little bit of streaking. I'm adding a little bit of water. Yes, I was using this to paint with for other things, but I decided tonight I'm going to use the same color on here because it turned out so pretty. So all I'm doing is I've watered down my chalk paste with distilled water, and you always want to use distilled water because you don't want to take the chance of any of the minerals in your tap water altering the pigment of the paste. And by adding distilled water to it, I've thinned it down so that it goes on much more like a paste, more like a paint than it does like a paste. And you can see some of those red streaks that picked up here when it hit some of that cranberry jam that wasn't dissolved. That's exactly the look that I'm going for. I'm actually painting my surface with some paste that had dried out mixed with other paste, and actually that's why my cranberry jam has little streaks in it. It didn't totally rehydrate. I had let the cover off. But I would suggest that you use the I Heart You paste pack. It's on special right now for $7.50. It's part of the Valentine 50% off. And it's 6 individual paste packets of cherry, eucalyptus, guava, marvelous, peachy keen, and gold shimmer. Perfect for this project. Now, I'm going to put this on a purchased wreath. You could see this heart-shaped beaded wreath that I bought at the craft store. And when I finish chalking on my simple shape, I'm going to attach it to the middle of this wreath, and it'll make a beautiful adornment for my front door. Now I actually dried this with my drying tool. You could leave it set overnight or actually use a hair dryer to dry it. Our drying tool basically blows focused air. It doesn't get really hot. So use a hair dryer on a low setting, or you might want to try our drying tool, or just leave it set overnight. But you want to make sure that the surface is totally dry before you put the transfer on. And if you've used a hair dryer or the drying tool, you want it to be back to room temperature before you apply the transfer to it. I generally wax my surface before I apply a transfer to it when I'm using wood. So I would suggest waxing your simple shape beforehand. Unless it's a chalkboard, you don't need to wax a chalkboard surface. So I'm applying my transfer. I fuzzed it on my fuzzing cloth so that it doesn't stick quite as snugly. And I've moved it to the bottom of the simple shape because I'm going to punch holes at the top to hang it. So I'm just going to apply some shimmer gold paste to my surface and then use the squeegee to spread it over the silkscreen. And as you can see through the silkscreen to the pink surface beneath it. And all I have to do is cover the silkscreen. Now my paste was a little thick here. I had actually had the jar open from before I started this project. I didn't have it covered, so it thickened up a little bit. If your paste ever dries up a little, add some distilled water to it to thin it down. And you want to always make sure that you use distilled water, because if you use tap water, it's possible that the minerals in your tap water can interfere with the pigment of the paste and make it not quite the color you're expecting. I actually have never really had that happen, but that's what I've heard, so I always have a little spray bottle of distilled water available just in case. If you do not have distilled water, use a little tray, one of our color trays, or a little dish or a little bowl, and put the paste in there and mix it with your tap water. If you're using a jar of paste, like a 3-ounce jar, never mix it all with that. If you don't have distilled water, use the tap water, but just mix up the little portion that you're going to be using, just to be on the safe side there. But it really, I'm making it sound more complicated than it is. If I had covered up my paste like I should have, I wouldn't have run into it thickening up a little bit. Okay, time for peel and reveal. Looks like I might have missed a little bit at the bottom of that E, so I'm going to add a little bit more paste and go over it. And it is a little distressed looking, and that's intentional. That's part of the design. Isn't it beautiful? Now, I measured my wreath, and because I'm going to be hanging this in between the beads, I needed to know how much from the left and how much from the right I would need the holes in my simple shape. And I'm going to use our power punch to do it. And because the wreath is made with wooden beads that obviously aren't perfectly symmetrical, on one end I'm going to have to bring it in 1 inch and the other end 1.25 inches. So if you're doing the same thing with a wooden wreath, just measure where you're going to hang it, and then determine where on the simple shape you're going to need to punch the holes. So I just marked it, and then I'm going to use the power punch to actually punch the holes in. This is such a nice little tool. I'm going to add it to the cart link, and if you already have something, just go ahead and remove it from the items. But I find it really helps me, and it's not like those great big cumbersome things that we used to have years ago. Takes me a little bit more hand strength. I actually have some screws in my hand from an accident with a car door. So you'll see me using two hands here to do it. But generally, anyone else could do it one-handed. It doesn't take too much. Just make sure that you've let the image that you chalked on it dry before you go to this step, because you don't want to smear it or blur it. So I've gotten some macrame cord that matches the like off-white of the wooden bead, so it's kind of like an ecru, and I'm going to use that to thread some beads onto my simple shape. I'll thread the ecru macrame cord through the holes. I cut about a 20-inch length, fold it in half, and then I'm going to thread it through the holes and string some beads on it. Now I've colored my beads with pink chalk paste, and all I did is watered it down, put some little paste in a baggie, threw my beads in there, spritz it with some water, and then massaged them a little bit, took them out of the baggie, and strung them on a long piece of pipe cleaner to dry. I find that by using the chalk piece to color my beads, my projects are always coordinated. I don't have any differences in the shading because my chalk paste that I used on the surface and the chalk paste that I used on my beads are exactly the same color because they're coming from the same jar of chalk paste. So that makes it simple and easy. Here I threaded the doubled macrame cord through the hole and then pulled it tight. So I think it's like a hitch hook or whatever, a hitch knot through the holes. And then I'm going to string my beads onto it. Now I find that if I use a little bit of packing tape on the edge of my macrame cord and then cut it at a little bit of a slant, it makes threading those beads through a real snap. Makes it very quick and easy. And in retrospect, I really should have chalked a design on the other side of the simple shape so that I could actually use this wreath for 2 different holidays. Just flip it around once Valentine is passed. And then just wrap this around it to act as kind of like a needle so that I could thread my beads on here. Just kind of roll it around a couple times. Clip off a piece for the other side. Okay. And then I'm going to cut this on the diagonal just to make it easier to thread my beads. Okay, so I'm just going to take a bead and thread it on here. That little piece of tape makes the macrame cord stiff and allows me to pull it on. And just because this is my habit, I'm going to put a little knot in here between the beads to kind of almost act like a spacer. And I think it'll coordinate it a little bit with the actual beaded wreath because similar colors between the cord and the beads. And I just found this beaded wreath at one of the craft stores. It's a found surface, if you will. A found wreath that I could put my surface on. And I think 3 will do me well here. I don't want it right up at the top of the wreath. I want it hanging, dangling down a little bit. I'm going to pull my string straight, put the last knot on it. Oops. Realize I'm probably off camera here. Sorry about that. Always better to have too much string or cord or thread than too little, isn't it? Okay, so much for that one. Let me add the tape to the other side and basically just repeat the process. So I'm basically doing the same thing to the other string. I've added the tape to stiffen up the macrame cord so that I could string the beads on it. And then I'm going to string each individual bead, put a knot between each bead. That's my habit, just so that if a string breaks, you don't have beads all over the floor. If I have a knot between each of them, the most that's ever going to run away or go rolling is one or two. And then I'm going to actually attach it to my beaded frame. Simple and quick little project, perfect for Valentine's. I didn't want them on the beads. Okay, so all I'm going to do now is basically tie this to my wreath. And I had checked earlier to make sure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I knew I needed to put it in between the 8th, so I'm going to cut this off, tie it, the two of them, and I will probably hot glue the dangling thread, if you will, or the macrame cord on the back so that it's not noticeable. And then basically, I could change this sign anytime I want. And if I was thinking a little bit ahead, I could have actually put a design on the opposite side so that when Valentine is passed, all I have to do is flip my wreath around and show the other side. How easy would that be? So I'm just knotting this, and like I said, I'll probably hot glue them to the back, or better yet, instead of hot gluing them to the back, I think what I'll do is just cut them really short and throw a little dab of glue between the beads to hold the very edges down. That way, if I choose to put something on the other side, it really truly will be reversible. And basically, there you go, quick and simple. I'll put the link in the description for the sale. Any questions, just drop them in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you soon.